So we're going to move across the channel now onto the continent. In June of 2022, the European Commission launched the Alliance for Zero-Emission Aviation. It's a key instrument to help the EU and the EU's aviation sector deliver on 2050 climate goals and the objectives of the Toulouse Declaration. The objective of the Alliance was to prepare the market for entry into service of zero-emission aircraft, delivering decarbonisation potential, enhancing connectivity and bolstering the EU's share of global aerospace technologies. Last year, the Alliance published its vision document, outlining both a baseline and ambitious scenario of how quickly zero-emission aircraft might roll out onto an actual flight network and some of the impacts that we would then see. In the ambitious scenario, 31% of Europe's aviation-related CO2 emissions can be saved by 2050 using battery, hybrid and hydrogen aircraft. And that swells by that time, by 2050, that's 68% of all flights flying. To support that, we would need 2.9 megatons per annum of hydrogen, publish government targets for 2030 on electrolytic hydrogen production globally, and that may need some updating because it's a couple of years old, but collectively they represented a 26 megaton per annum total, suggesting that by 2050 the figure is very, very achievable for EU aviation, but some major challenges, as Graham said, to get the infrastructure in place as early, both at airport and upstream as well. The organisation, the Alliance for Zero-Emission Aviation, is now preparing to launch a major roadmap which will set the joint course for industry and government towards the delivery of zero-emission air travel. What is the game plan for supporting the rapid adoption, and how can zero-emission flight adoption support or complement the goals of the Commission's SAF policy, which is obviously another key plank of its decarbonisation strategy? To address these questions, I'm delighted to welcome Jean-Pierre Lentz, the Senior Aeronautics Expert within DG DEFIS within the EU Commission. Jean-Pierre has been a key figure in the development and delivery of the Alliance from the outset, and it's great to have him today to cover off what we're going to see shortly in the publication of the Alliance for Zero-Emission Aviation's roadmap. Jean-Pierre, I don't know if you're able to turn your camera on in the top right-hand corner. Hopefully we should be able to see you. We're also joined by Erwin Kerberiu, who's the lead airport, is the lead for airport infrastructure and ecosystem at Beyond Aero. Beyond Aero is developing one, which is the first hydrogen electric business jet with the ambition of being able to fly you from locations like London to Nice. So big range on that hydrogen electric private jet. We're also joined by, moving to the larger scale of the airframe construction. We're joined by Stefan Rualt from Airbus, where he's the head of Zero-E ecosystem and value. And Stefan is an aerospace engineer, aeronautics engineer by training. So great to have Stefan for his perspective on how we're developing and his participation in the AZEA grouping as well. And we're also joined by Kyle Martin, who's Vice President of EU Affairs for the General Aviation Manufacturers Association in Brussels. Kyle has been a key figure within the Alliance also, particularly in developing a model of the future flight network. So we've got a very well-informed panel to talk about the various interventions and the plans to bring zero-emission air travel to the European Union. So I'm going to start with you, Jean-Pierre. If you could give us a little bit of a background as to some of the work that AZEA and DG DEFIS has undertaken over the last few years and how it's brought together industry and what some of the outcomes of that are. Oh, we have you on mute though, unfortunately, Jean-Pierre.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Dominic, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I mean, indeed, I mean, in the Commission, we saw the emergence of numerous projects developing hybrid electric and hydrogen-powered aircraft as really something promising for the European aviation sector, both in terms of greening, but also industrial perspective. But we know as well that it's not enough to support the technology development, as it was already discussed, I think, today. Perhaps an even bigger challenge that the development of the technology is to ensure that these new aircraft can roll out and that we can deploy in Europe electric and hydrogen flights. And this is a challenge that not only requires that all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem come together and are committed to achieve this objective, but also that we can deploy coherent actions together. And indeed, back 2021, the Commission considered that looking at this challenge, it considered that the Industrial Alliance, which is a tool that the Commission has and has deployed in different ecosystem already, may help addressing this challenge. And therefore, as you mentioned, the Commission launched the Alliance for Zero-Emission Aviation back in June 2022. So the Alliance is a voluntary gathering facilitated by the European Commission of today more than 200 stakeholders across the ecosystem, committed to make hybrid battery electric and hydrogen flight a reality in Europe. And members indeed represent the entire ecosystem, from manufacturers, airports, energy providers, operators, lessors, NSPs, member states and regions, regulators and public organizations, including, quite importantly, I would say, AZEA and Eurocontrol, standardization. We have even non-governmental organizations and trade unions. And AZEA is open for members to join. So if anybody is interested, the application process is quite easy. So 3 main activities for the Alliance we started by, and we continue to precisely identify all together the gap and that could prevent the operation of these aircraft. And the second is to define this roadmap for the deployment of these flights in Europe. And the third element is to continue supporting, promoting, and monitoring the future roadmap. So indeed, building on the vision report you mentioned, Dominic, that AZEA published in 2024, now the Alliance is developing the roadmap. So the roadmap will or should provide to the entire ecosystem, industry, but also public authorities and investors, which is of course a very key element, a detailed pathway on how hybrid electric and hydrogen flight could deploy across Europe until 2050. And the roadmap should set ambitions, identify the enablers, and define the actions required in 6 main domains: so aircraft, energy, aerodromes, certification, standardization, regulation, airspace insertion, and operators, and identify the responsibility of each actors. And to be concrete, the roadmap indeed will set ambitious objectives for the deliveries of hybrid battery electric and hydrogen aircraft until 2050. It will identify possible network for electric and hydrogen flight, and on that basis, compute also the energy requirements. We had already a first assessment in the vision. Now the roadmap will provide much more detailed calculation. Endorsed by the 200 members of the Alliance, the roadmap should really send a clear signal to public authorities and financing organizations, demonstrating the willingness and the ambition of the sector to deploy electric and hydrogen flights in Europe as soon as possible. And it should also provide a guide to the entire ecosystem to identify the role of each members of the ecosystem and help them to develop a concrete action. The roadmap will be released on the 20th April to be confirmed at the occasion of an event that will also be broadcasted publicly, so everybody could attend, let's say, this small handover event. So that's a bit the plan.
Super. Kyle, you may have recognised that we're likely to come to you next. We seem to have lost 2 participants. Hopefully we'll get them back in due course. But you've been highly involved in the development of the roadmap as well, and it's got a major importance to some of your membership. We're obviously wanting to see the industrial opportunity across the continent realised. So yeah, give us a little bit of a flavour as to why you think it's so important to manufacturers and how you've been involved, and maybe a bit of colour on the flight network you've been working on.
Super. Thank you, Dominic, and thanks for the invitation. So yeah, as GAMA, we've been heavily involved in zero-emission technology certification and other developments for over a decade now. And we've been working with DG DEFIS and the European Commission even when the AZEA Alliance was just an idea back in 2021. So we've been heavily involved, both myself and our members and various GAMA staff from across our Brussels and Washington teams have been heavily involved in the alliance. So specifically, my role within AZEA has been the chair of Working Group 1, which is the future rollout scenarios. What is that exactly? So that is essentially looking at what is the forecast, what are the predictions, what are the different scenarios for the delivery of electric, hybrid, and hydrogen aircraft from now through to 2050. So if you like, my job is kind of a Mystic Meg kind of role, trying to predict the future. But I prefer to term it as providing different visions of what the future could be. So Jean-Pierre mentioned the AZEA vision that was published last year and the roadmap that we're finalizing now. But we're looking at what are the different scenarios for based on market forecasts, based on different OEMs, certification, industrialization, and sales plans. And then also bring in things like what is the future demand coming from the marketplace, and what does all that look like? So we basically build forecasts based on the different market segments, from general aviation to regional air mobility up to regional aviation and up to small, medium, large aircraft. The whole spectrum of different categories of aircraft and those three different types of propulsion looking forward. Based on that, we have what we call our baseline scenario and our ambitious scenario. So the ambitious scenario is essentially if everything goes to plan and all the policy and financial and other measures needed to support this industry are put in place over the coming years, this is what we can achieve. And that would mean something of the order of 20,000 zero-emission aircraft deployed by 2050 in the European market. That's no small challenge, but we also recognize there's a range of different possibilities within that. We also have the baseline scenario, which is much more conservative, looking at more regular growth, shall we say, of the deployment of these aircraft, and not as quite as ambitious. But we want to maintain that ambition. And one of the reasons what we're trying to do now is to illustrate that in a more convincing way. So you mentioned the AZEA Flight Network Working Group, which I also co-lead together with Eurocontrol and DLR, the German Aerospace Research Center. It's basically looking at if we have these aircraft on the different market segments, and we have Eurocontrol's existing traffic data for IFR flights today and their forecasts going forward through 2050. We also have the energy and performance characteristics of the ZeroAvia aircraft and other zero-emission aircraft models going through those decades. What does that look like in a flight network? So if we assume we do a like-for-like replacement on an existing aircraft, I don't know, ATR 42, and it replaced with a hydrogen equivalent by 2040, say, what does that look like in the network? What airports need, therefore, to have hydrogen refueling infrastructure by when? And it's just looking at those different scenarios. So we've built a very impressive model with Eurocontrol, which is our flight network model, which is basically allows us to test different scenarios. So let's say hydrogen's only available at 10 airports by 2040. What does that network look like? Is that network viable? Obviously, there's external things we can't control, like we don't know exactly yet which airlines or operators are going to buy which aircraft by when, but we're basically looking at scenarios that helps us visualize that. And based on that visualization, we can try to start looking at different scenarios, different inputs, looking at testing different variables, which then will help airports, energy providers, infrastructure providers, countries, governments, regional governments to start to look at where they need to allocate resources and by when for electric charging infrastructure and hydrogen refueling infrastructure. It's not a singular model. It's a model that gives us a range of possibilities based on different variables and different inputs. And now that we have that model in place, and once the roadmap is published, we'll be able to start testing that model and giving a bit of a clearer steer to member states and airports and so on over the coming years of what they need to deploy by when.
Super, thanks, Kyle. A really good overview. I think we've got both Stefan. Welcome back. We've got Erwin back on the stage. We can't see your camera, Erwin, but I'm hoping we'll be able to hear you if you come off mute, and you'll be able to provide your introductory remarks. Are you able to speak?
Yeah. Can
we?
you
Oh yeah, we can.
I should have my camera on, so.
We can't see you. It seems to be some kind of bug with your camera, but we can hear you. So if you're able to just give us your thoughts on the topic, that would be fantastic, please.
Okay. Well, I don't know why it doesn't work, but thanks again for the invitation. Happy to participate to this panel. So yeah, Beyond Aero. So we are an aircraft manufacturer developing hydrogen electric aircrafts. So we are not reinventing the aircraft. We really adapt conventional architecture to hydrogen propulsion constraints, which basically integrates H2 storage. So in our case, it's gaseous hydrogen, fuel cell system, and electric engines. And we have been partner of AZEA for several years now, thanks to Jean-Pierre also. And we have been so actively contributing to all the working groups I mentioned before, and more recently to the deployment of the roadmap. And actually, this collective work is extremely important for us. And the objective of this roadmap is really clear. It's to avoid any mismatch between aircraft development on one side and on the other side, infrastructure deployment and regulatory readiness. So we really need to make sure that everything is aligned. And a very concrete example I wanted to share of the work we did and achieved within the working group 3, so with airports, was the AZEA airport infrastructure fact sheets tools that is publicly available, and it allowed it basically us to work pragmatically on different hydrogen supply and distribution scenarios for airports, for both gaseous and liquid hydrogen. And on our side, so we mainly contributed to the distribution aspects, which basically represents the direct link between the refueling station and the aircraft. And here we focus on short-term application because we are again based on gaseous hydrogen, like ZeroAvia for first application, and also a solution that already exists today, so we can facilitate operation and accelerate time to market. So this work has also highlighted that many European airports already have hydrogen projects on specific scenario I mentioned before. So whether combining production and distribution, or sometimes only focusing on distribution and potentially addressing both gaseous and liquid hydrogen. And these projects are also possible thanks to the support of European funding programs, which are really important on the question. And AZEA plays a crucial role in connecting these initiatives and integrating them into a coherent European trajectory. So for Beyond Aero, it's really this work is absolutely essential, actually, because we are not developing an aircraft alone and hoping that the infrastructure will be there one day. Through AZEA and its working group and roadmap, we are really working in parallel on all the key building blocks. And what is particularly reassuring today is that there is a shared understanding, precise plans, and a collective commitment to ensure that that aircraft, infrastructure, energy supply, and certification evolve together and become operational at the right time. So looking ahead, very much looking forward to continue the work this year, and especially to move forward from roadmaps to concrete actions. Thanks.
Fantastic, Owen. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have questions on some of that and some of Beyond Aero's plans coming in on the Q&A. We talked in the first panel with the UK team. There was a lot of talk about the chicken and egg. Jean-Pierre, you mentioned there's the kind of key 6 different areas that we need to focus on. Stefan, I know for Airbus it's been obviously a key concern as to how does the ecosystem evolve in lockstep with the aircraft development. So I wonder if you can just give us a little bit of a flavour of your interest in the AZEA roadmap, and then also how that ties in with the plans for the Zero-E.
Sure. Thanks again for the invite. Absolutely, we're very active, and we've been very active in AZEA for a reason. And I may start with really just giving a bit of a highlight on where we are with the project, and I'll tie that in with the AZEA. So I just wanted to acknowledge that Zero-E is really a key driver of our own journey to pioneer climate neutral commercial aviation that fits right at the core of our purpose to pioneer sustainable aviation. And a sustainable aerospace for us, safe and united world. So I think what we have been doing over the last probably 6, 8, 10 years is looking at every single potential possible technology that's out there, which supports our journey to climate neutral aviation. And as you all know, as we all know, we've concluded that fuel cell technologies give give us pretty much a full electric propulsion powertrain, which gets us there in terms of having the lowest possible climate impact solution. So that's very important for us to continue on that front. And last year, we've been doing a lot of demonstration of technology. I really want to acknowledge that we've been progressing a lot on the basis of those technologies that we've highlighted. And those progress have been made by demonstrating the fuel cell propulsion technologies, the distribution and storage of liquefied hydrogen. So that's really been an awesome year in terms of demonstrating those technology. And where we are today is, we think with the right set of technologies that we have currently, we can do an aircraft like the one in my background, so a 100-seat airplane that would cover a distance of 1,000 nautical miles. And as you see on the picture here, it would be powered by 4 propulsion systems, which are essentially electric propulsion. So hydrogen is the way we get there, but it's essentially electric aircraft with hydrogen storage at the back of the aircraft. So we are making good progress with that. And as we mature our technologies, as we continue to explore those technologies, we'll be exploring also if we can further mature the product, scale up the product, and going towards an even bolder ambition. So that we've really been up to that level of disruption for now. But really, like we all know, we're in charge of the technology, and my friends at Beyond Aero, Dominic, and our friends at ZeroAvia, we do the technology, and that's an ambition. That's quite a challenge on its own. But it's not going to work if we do the best aircraft and there is no hydrogen at the airport. And as we all know, that's what's at stake here. And I really should add, voicing probably your voice as well, we want to have an impact. So we manufacturers are interested in having an impact. We are not interested in making a technological demonstration showing off that technology works. We want that technology to work, to be implemented, to be operated, and to have a real impact. That's exactly what we're looking for. And for that, we cannot do it on our own. It's been obvious at Airbus since the very, very beginning of the Zero-E project. We have on our side engaged with a number of stakeholders, but there is just so much we can do on our own, and we don't want to do that on our own. Hence the AZEA, and I think Jean-Pierre, we were also quite early adopters of the concept of having an alliance like AZEA, and the value is tremendous. It's the value of bringing everybody together around one single set of assumption, one single set of roadmap, as opposed to all of us working with different assumptions, different time scales. So I think the way we fit in and we look at the AZEA roadmap in particular, but the whole work done with the AZEA is of paramount importance. It's the tool that we have, the way that we have to align all of us in this complex ecosystem around one single purpose on the basis of one roadmap, which allows us basically to sing the same song. And that's how we can be powerful. So I think that is in a nutshell how we value AZEA and how close to our hearts that project is.
It's a great call to action. I think everyone would echo who's participated, and Jean-Pierre made the call to invite anybody who is listening in and thinking they would have something to add to think about joining, because it is a really great group and has made terrific strides so far. Thinking, I mean, you had all of you assembled have had the advantage of having seen the roadmap, contributed to it, and you know what's going to appear when it's published soon. I'm just curious to think. What do you see as the kind of key thing? What have you seen over the last year that heartens you? So it may be the technology development that Stefan mentioned. Maybe you could give a little bit more color on some of the things that Airbus has done that gives you enthusiasm and heartens you for the road ahead. Erwin, it may be kind of your technological roadmap. But I'm just curious for each of you, and maybe jump in if you're ready to start. But what do you think are the most heartening developments over the last year or so that kind of really give you some faith in the roadmap and the road ahead?
But I think really my hope is that the roadmap and AZEA will support the expectation that have been very clearly, I think, set by all the colleagues here. The need to bring together all the members. Now, I think I hope the roadmap will address. I have to say today, in terms of policy, I have the impression that SAF is taking the big focus. And these technology are still seen as something a bit more distant. And I hope that really, also with the publication of the roadmap, and as I said, backed by more than 200 organizations, this may also bring, especially for the Commission now, which is preparing the next multi-annual financing framework, the impression that there is a need to put this fast, which contribute to the greening, but also to the competitiveness of the industry, more into the focus that what it was perhaps the case for the last year, where again I felt that SAF was really really the big picture in the middle of the effort. So for me, this is a bit my expectation, really, to bring this attention, higher attention to the policymakers at all level, because I have to say, we can come back on that, when we look, for instance, through the AFIR regulation obligation to report from member states about the deployment of infrastructure in all transport modes. Of course, there is no obligation yet to deploy electric and hydrogen infrastructure at airport, but there is an invitation to report on what is done. And I have to say, it is, let's say, not very, I would say, at the moment, encouraging. And I think we can do a lot, as also Kyle mentioned, providing concrete data on how this could really happen, how the industry sees that happening, and also bring member states, but also regions closer to this, to us, to what we do here. And I think this is really an important communication tool as well, planning and communication tool. Yeah.
Super. Anything to add, Stefan, Kyle, Owen?
Yeah, maybe a comment on this subject of SAF, Jean-Pierre, as you raised it, and as I think that's quite key. Sadly, we're in a world where we like to oppose things, and we forever get into those debates whether one solution is better than the other one. And our view at Airbus is that they are just complementary for many reasons, by the way. First, the obvious reason, which has been spoken about in the previous panel, is that anyway, SAF with electrofuels will need hydrogen. Bon. But even if we look at it from a more global, holistic point of view, SAF is going to be the measure to decarbonize the longer haul, the more demanding sectors. And that's fine. That's what we have. We should push for that. But there is a huge pressure on SAF. I mean, if we're asking SAF to do it all, there is a huge pressure on availability, on cost. So to start with, hydrogen can be valued and should be valued as relieving the pain on SAF, relieving the pressure. It's what we do will support SAF, but will allow to direct SAF to the right place where it really is needed. And as it turns out, hydrogen does also bring other merits, new merits, additional climate attributes and credentials that will help us as an industry converge towards climate neutrality goals. So I think that was my comment, and our view at Airbus obviously is that we don't oppose SAF and hydrogen. We need both, and we need to push equally for both. And I think that's important. We always keep that in mind. And probably my other comment is a time perspective. The AZEA is critical to us. It's fundamental through the AZEA that we show the hydrogen economy and the hydrogen value chain that we are here as an industry. We are important. We will be an important customer for this economy. We may not be the prime customer right now today, but the plans will make us a big customer. And to do that, we need initiatives like the AZEA that really shows this hydrogen economy, how aviation will at some point become a big customer, starting slow, growing, and then becoming an important customer in this value chain. So I think those are really the merits of the AZEA work.
And speaking about I'll come to you, Owen, maybe for the answer to this question first, but speaking about the value chain, in particularly the role that airports have to play, Owen, in your work with airports, what are you seeing in terms of positive signs of adoption? Particularly the last panel talked a little bit about starting small, getting the the very early gaseous hydrogen infrastructure in place, and that's what kind of might catalyze the future of liquid hydrogen for large commercial aircraft. But yeah, what are you seeing from the airports that you're talking to? Are you seeing that traction on the ground?
Yeah, so for this question, and if I try also to link that to the roadmap, basically we need regulatory homogenization for hydrogen across European airports. And today, I think that one of the main challenge is the fragmentation of hydrogen regulation from one country to another. This creates sometimes some kind of uncertainty for airports, but also for manufacturers and operators. So I think that the roadmap provides a common reference framework for hydrogen at airports, adaptable, of course, to each airport specificities, because that's also something important to take into account, but that will be applicable across Europe. And I think that this is essential because an aircraft, of course, must be able to operate consistently across different airports, not just at its departure, let's say. I have to land sometimes in other airports, so it's really important, this homogenization. And also the roadmap, I think, also will enable a structured way to track also the airport readiness over time, helping assess the maturity of hydrogen project deployed on their platform, and also ensuring a coherent rollout across the network. And I think that will be also of course helped thanks to the roadmap of AZEA, because yes, we are seeing a lot of projects in airports evolving, but it's not really shared to everyone what is happening. And so I think that this is also a way to homogenize this communication, and also be sure about what is really happening at airport level.
Super. I want to come to one more question from me, and then we've got some really interesting questions being posted into the chat, and then also in the Q&A. So we'll just have a quick look at some of those as well. The question for me is, some people have touched on it a little bit. We've talked about all of the funding that's already provided by the EU to support the R&D. We have programs like Clean Aviation, obviously Horizon Europe, and the EU Innovation Fund. What are the additional key levers that the policymakers can use to help propel this roadmap? And again, I know it's not published yet, but we're really keen to get any of your thoughts on what key levers you think are really important that are put in place.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think still funding research is important, and as I mentioned, we need now to ensure that under the next MFF, not only the current funding remains, but also that we could also broaden the scope, also looking to smaller projects, which obviously will be also the first to reach the market. So that would be, in any case, still a first challenge to achieve altogether, to have that in the next MFF. But also, as I mentioned, to have more visibility, as I mean, Stefan correctly mentioned, that we need to have all paths worked out all together in parallel. And therefore, this path here of electric and hydrogen aircraft more prominent, that would help also to take really to take the appropriate action in the different policy framework we have at the European Union. It's not only member states; we have also a lot of things to address ourselves on the AZEA side, but not only. To promote, to achieve, let's say, to help this project to reach the market, but also to help operators to be able to use this market. So incentive for operators is certainly also something we need to start looking at to ensure that these aircraft are taken up. So therefore, really putting this, let's say, strength of work really in the focus, for instance, in a possibly new aviation strategy is something which would be certainly very important to ensure that all the different actions are taken, funding across the whole supply chain, from deployment, I mean, from development to deployment. Today we have a number of funding programs which are disconnected, I would say. We hope that we can bring them more closely together with a clear path based on the roadmap, but also to take all the regulatory, let's say, to do all the regulatory work we need to do. So that would be really important.
And I think, Jean-Pierre, you've a good advert there for our panel at 4:45 p.m, which we'll hear from some airline leaders and be led by Montserrat Barriga, who is the lead of the European Region Airline Association. I'm sure we'll hear about all of the economic struggles that airlines will face in adopting new technology. So it's really, really good point that you make there. Kyle, let me come to you as well on the same question, because it would be great to hear your additional thoughts. And then we're going to move to some of the questions in the chat and Q&A.
Thanks, Dom. Yeah, I think just to build on Jean-Pierre's point, funding is the key issue, whether it's continued investment in R&D. And one of the messages we've been pushing heavily towards Horizon Europe and clean aviation for many years is it's all great to look at the big Airbus-size aircraft research projects, but actually there's a lot we can do in the sub-19 seat sector to prove these technologies that can then be scaled up. That's been a challenge we've been facing for many years, but I think that message is slowly but surely getting across. And I think that's one of the things the roadmap will illustrate quite impressively, is that this build up from 9 to 19 to 30-seater to 50-seater up to 100-seaters like the Airbus size, it's a progression that will go between 2030 and 2050. We need to support that. But also on the funding side, on the manufacturers, whether it's existing legacy manufacturers or it's new startups and scale-ups, is to make sure that we have funding mechanisms in place to make sure companies can get from TRL 6 to TRL 9 in deployment. That industrialization, productionization phase is what has killed a lot of great ideas and a lot of great companies in all segments of aviation. Most notably in Europe, we've got much bigger struggles getting venture capital and things than perhaps they do in the United States, but other mechanisms as well, whether it's regional support schemes, it's low interest loans, or looking at the operator side, and maybe, like you said, for your airlines coming on later, looking at things like how do we look at public service obligation routes? How do we incentivize those to perhaps favor or incentivize or support green aviation or zero-emission aviation on those routes as one of the criteria to help bridge that gap, because the regional airlines are not the most profitable sector of European aviation. If you look at the Eurocontrol data going back decades, the number of connectivity and routes between smaller airports, whether they're feeders into hubs or point to point between regions, has been diminishing for decades. We need to hopefully use the ambition, the benefits of zero-emission aircraft and the 19 to 50 seat sector to see how we can incentivize that market. And last but not least, we need to make sure our certification authorities are fully staffed and supported and resourced to develop this, because without certification, whether it's the AZEA, UKCA, or FAA, this will not happen on time. So that's a very important message, and one that I know we're pushing.
Yeah, absolutely.
One comment I'd like to make super briefly to back what you've been saying, but putting a different perspective around that, is the level of disruption that we are proposing to bring to this industry, i.e. bringing a fuel cell in the air powered by hydrogen, has not been seen in our industry for over 50 years, and I'm gentle on. So what I'm trying to say here is that the need for support is huge, and I think it is because we are proposing a huge disruption, and that should not be overlooked. The level of disruption we are bringing should not be overlooked. And it looks sometimes like we are just doing business as usual, step innovation, maturing a couple of technology bricks here and there. No, we are really willing to offer a huge disruption, and that's why we need support.
Super. Okay, and in some respects, replacing an incumbent system, which wasn't necessarily the case in the dawn of the jet age, increasing the challenges. So if we move to the questions that we've got lined up in the chat, I'm going to try and fire through these relatively quickly. So I'm going to abstract this slightly because it's to be across all manufacturers. But for Erwin, for Stefan, Kyle as well, I'm sure you want to weigh in. But what is the one unsolved technical challenge? What's the big technical challenge in delivering hydrogen aircraft that you see as the kind of the big thing that needs to be de-risked? Is it liquid hydrogen? Where is it in the liquid hydrogen storage system? Do you see it more in the fuel cell systems? And we've got some panels coming up on both those topics, so another good advert. But yeah, I'm just curious as to if there's any thoughts from the OEMs on that.
I think for me, it's the integration of all those technologies. we can mature them separately, and we are doing that. Putting this together, integrating them is the biggest challenge from my standpoint.
Yeah, in particular the storage, of course, because that's the main topic, and we still need to let's say get into a corresponding certification framework. So the mass is key, of course, for aircraft. So get the mass in addition to the performance that the clients wants. I think it's this challenge, and the storage, of course, is important. And actually the adaptation also, I think, of the refueling solution to the aircraft specifications, because we have solutions that currently exist, but they are actually not used for aircraft, and an aircraft is not a truck. It's more complex. So I think there is also need on this aspect, and we need to be sure that the refueling solution at least are adapting to the aircraft specification, because we also need on our side to take into account some aspects in order to adapt at some point the aircraft design to match also the specification of the station. So I think that's also an important topic to address.
It brings me to the final question I'll pull from here, because we have got some really good questions here, which I think are possibly more suited for the airframe development panel that we've got coming up a little bit later, and also kind of our deep dive into fuel cells, for example. So please, we'll try and address those as we get to those panel sessions. But the one that I think has jumped out is on education. So specific to engineering skills, which might be to do with the manufacturer. But how does the roadmap look at the idea of skills education, and how we're going to have the workforce of the future to deliver this transition that we've talked about being challenging?
I don't know who wants to answer. No, I think this has been clearly identified as an enabler, and few actions have been identified, but it's always a challenge, of course, and probably there is also a need that has been identified for the sector to look at other, perhaps also create a bit of collaboration with other sectors, not only to stay as kind of isolation, trying to attract to the sector the people, but also collaborate with other sectors. I think these are the few ideas that have been identified in the roadmap, but needs, of course, to be now elaborated and work out. So I don't know if the other colleague have.
I think it's kind of linking to what Stefan said earlier. This is not business as usual. And if you're a young person, I know what it was like when I was in high school or at university looking for future careers. What could be more exciting than working on the next great leap technologically in aviation? That's what the overall roadmap message is. Look, between now and 2050, there's going to be thousands, possibly millions of jobs, millions of technical challenges to be solved by the next generation of engineers. And I think that overall message should be an inspiring one. Let's fix the decarbonizing aviation challenge. Let's solve these technological problems about gaseous storage or whatever. And that overall message, I think, is the most positive one for the future workforce.
Super, brilliant. Okay, that's a great inspiring note to answer that question on. I think, well, we're up on time now. I'll just ask you if you've got any other final reflections, if you want to kind of add anything to the discussion that we've already had, which has been really, really helpful. Then please do chime in here. Just let's have our closing remarks on the topic. Have we come to Jean-Pierre first?
Yeah, just on my side, inviting indeed, not only now we will have the roadmap and invite the whole ecosystem to look at the roadmap, kind of endorse the roadmap, and for those who are willing eventually also to join the alliance, but more importantly also to look at the roadmap as something that can guide their own reflection, their own decision on the next step to contribute to this endeavor. That's my final word.
Thanks, Jean-Pierre. Kyle?
Just join the effort, join AZEA, join associations like GAMA, support this work, because it's a lot of work and a lot of coordination to be done, and we'll only get there if we have the right volunteers and expertise supporting the AZEA working groups to make this possible.
Superb. Owen?
Yeah, for me, we talked about education. I think like we we will learn by doing. So we need to do, and we need to have the capacity to do this demonstration and test and gain some knowledge and experience on that. So this is key, and I think that all these initiative, all the funding needs to also go on like what can be actively done in the short term. So thanks again, and of course John is there.
Superb. And then Stefan to close.
Thank you. So yeah, I'd say that the task at hand for us is no less than reconciling the growth trajectory of our industry with the long-term expectations of society. And this task, it's a teamwork. So my closing remark is, let's do it. Let's do it together, and we'll make it happen.
Fantastic. Thanks all. A big thank you to a brilliant panel. Thanks for joining us. Really enjoyed that discussion. I can see also, I mean, Nick Wright's just had a fabulous question into the chat there. Actually, we'll try and ask that one to our founder and CEO, Val Miftakov, who will be joining us. We're going to take about an hour's break. Val will be joining us at 3 p.m. UK time.